Great, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Karen. My name is Anne Alexander. I'm a Senior Research Associate at Cambridge Digital Humanities and Director of Learning. I also will be supervising the PhD programme. So I'm going to be chairing this session. We're really excited to have so many people here. I'm going to hand over and ask everyone else on the call to introduce themselves in a minute. But I just wanted to say what would be great is if, while we're talking, we're going to have a short presentation to start with. If you think of questions, please use the Q&A function to ask questions and get your questions coming in so that we can be thinking about how to answer them. We'll be handing over to addressing the questions live after that. And we are recording this session, so we will be answering questions in a way that doesn't identify questioners. And we hope to then turn that into updates for our FAQ, and we may well be posting the recording on the website. If you have questions that are unanswered by the end of the session, also, you're very welcome to email us. I should say, as you came in, it's Karen Herbane was welcoming you, who's in our admin team and is running the call in the background. But I'm now going to pass over just for brief introductions. Thank you. And Jonathan?
Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan. I'm a research software engineer in CDH.
And then Leo?
I'm Leo Impet, and I'm assistant professor in CDH and on a terrible internet connection, so sorry if I freeze at any point.
Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan Huser. I'm a brand new hire here as an assistant professor in DH.
And finally, Hugo, who's then going to segue nicely into a presentation.
That nicely, I'm not sure about, but I'm Uglial. I'm a member of the English faculty, where I helped deliver the MPhil in Digital Humanities and now convene the MPhil in Digital Humanities. Now, for this session, I think it will be important for us to give you some ideas or some general idea about what we do and what we research, and particularly the type of projects we are interested in. So I will say for myself that in terms of research and supervision interests, I'm looking at and for projects dealing with topics ranging from digital activism, online cultures and subcultures, political economy of the internet, limits and possibilities of tech, including AI, and online policy, regulation, online normativity, if you will. Now, I will, as Anne said, segue into the presentation. I will share my screen. You will tell me whether everything is okay. So for the first question, we happen to have with us the founder of CDH, the one who created CDH from scratch. So Anne Alexander will explain what CDH is.
Thank you, Hugo. Although I'm not really the founder of CDH, because CDH is a collective endeavour, and in fact, our director Caroline is not here, so we don't really have the full team here for you to see this. What I could say though is something about how, in a sense, the kind of disciplinary background that I think is important to understanding how CDH is unique. And I would say that actually does partially reflect my own trajectory as somebody who came from a traditional humanities background. I'm a historian and a linguist by training. My PhD was in history of the Middle East, and got interested in theories of technology. And through working in digital humanities for several years before CDH was founded, helping to work with research projects across a very wide range of different disciplines, I became interested in this kind of both clash and entanglement between the human and the digital in different directions. So one of the things I would say is that, in contrast to, for example, a research centre that was firmly within the social sciences of the internet or digital cultures, we do have roots into what we do from the traditional humanities, and we're very open to that. But also, likewise, actually, we don't do the kind of digital humanities that is more circumscribed by being kind of library studies or just collections or actually computational literary studies on their own without that social sciences dimension, without thinking about how can we think critically about humans and technology from every direction. And I think the critical and the questioning part are really the key sort of elements here, that if you're whichever direction, disciplinary direction you've come to us from, if you're prepared to be critical about both technologies and humans, then this is potentially a home for you. I hope that might answer some questions about where CDH situates itself. And I would say as well that looking at previous applications for the PhD program and also for our MPhil program, we are drawing in people from both from kind of social sciences, technology, different kind of technology disciplines, and from the humanities in fairly well distributed measures. So that's something that makes our program, I think, really unique.
Thank you, Anne. And we had a terrible Venn diagram here to define the undefinable, and this is just very much lines up with what DH is, right? So it could be looking at processes of digital transformation from a humanities, cultural theory perspective, or looking at whatever topic with digital methods. So these are not mutually exclusive. So it is a subject that invites interdisciplinarity, and I always say even transdisciplinarity. So transcending that silo kind of mentality of certain disciplines and trying or aspiring to have a more interdisciplinary approach, because what matters here is your topic, your research, and not where you're anchored, the disciplinary background. Cambridge Digital Humanities. So we have a broad range of resources for you. As you may imagine, we benefit without doing much from the academic environment in Cambridge, which is very rich, very diverse, very cross-disciplinary, which is not the same as saying interdisciplinary. And we also contribute to this research environment. And part of this contribution goes through our graduate research seminars, renamed CDH Open. So, and we have had, by the kinds of names we have been inviting, you see the broad range of topics and interests. So people from Rupika Rizam to Mercedes Benz to Ruth Anherd, Jeff Cox, Louisa Moore, Operate, which is a duo of up-and-coming duo of artists, Matteo Pasquinelli. So you see that we are trying to add to the existing academic culture in Cambridge, this DH component and this networking across disciplines and people. That is, of course, as I said, wider resources in Cambridge. Cambridge is packed of research events and talks, seminars, exhibitions. You could go through the ideally 3 years, most of the times, 4 years of your PhD, attending departmental talks and Cambridge talks and college events and so on and so forth. This is not to say that we do not have a program for you. We do have a program for you, but part of your experience in Cambridge is about your personal interaction with the surrounding academic environment. So you carve out your own space, you make your own connections, of course, always in close connection with the department and with your supervisor and with your advisor. But there's lots of individual flexibility going forward. PhD in digital humanities, and I've mentioned this already, but there's some important definitions that are very peculiar here that we should bear in mind. Different universities have different nomenclatures. Here we have a main supervisor and then an advisor. Just to preempt some questions on this topic, usually, as a rule of thumb, there are no co-supervisions with other universities, but there may be space. There may be a space for exceptions. We can talk about that later. What we do have in place is a system where you have a supervisor that's assigned after your application is accepted and after you are admitted. And then during the first months, you are also assigned an advisor who will complement the work of your supervisor, and it will be present in your registration at the end of the first year. It's one more point of contact. It could be within the same department or in another department within the same university, in this case, Cambridge, of course. Now, you have two options. You have full-time or part-time PhD. Full-time is 3 to 4 years. Part-time 5 to 7 years, 60% of 75%. Fees are exactly the same, but divided accordingly, depending on the number of years. The examination is by thesis, so it's a full work, 80,000 words. Now, again, we have people from all over the world. The number of words varies a lot across universities. Also, within Cambridge, it varies a lot. It's still 80,000 in English. In other departments, it's 60,000. So it's a big piece of work. You have classes and seminars throughout. These are more, I would say, are more condensed in the first year, where you have research training programs prepared for you by English, by CDH, and by the brilliant program set up by Anne Alexander, who runs the CDH learning. And as I've mentioned earlier, you have reading groups, you have lectures, you have the rich environment in Cambridge. So there's a wealth of resources that you can use in order to enrich your experience in Cambridge. Already mentioned the training and development sessions. These go, as we have there, from research design to preparing a book to technical skills. This year we'll have actually one for you that covers research methods, integration of AI into your workflow, spatial mapping. So there's always something happening. One, on top of that, or underlying that, there's also a set of sessions that occur and reoccur. So there's a program prepared for you with basic skills and beyond. Now, in terms of applicant background, as you may imagine, we have just defined digital humanities as being interdisciplinary and even transdisciplinary. So our applicants come from a wide range of disciplinary belongings, right? They come from literature, from media art, from sociology, from history, from all over the place. So do not let your disciplinary background be an obstacle to your application. On the contrary, right? So because DH tends to welcome other disciplines, learn from other disciplines, and enrich the field with the people from other disciplines. The applicants for the course should, and the keyword there is should, have achieved a UK Master's Merit and or equivalent. If your degree is not from the UK, and this is very important both for you and for us, there is an international qualification that sets up the equivalences. Do check these and try to check the right box, to tick the right boxes, right? Because this could be the difference between having a lower score or a higher score when we are assessing your application, because grade point average matters, right? Having said that, in case you haven't achieved this threshold, I still encourage you to apply, because there are cases in which an academic case can be made for people who haven't met the academic threshold, but for some reason, be it professional, technical, we find them or consider them eligible for the PhD. Application details, you can find all this on the website. The important thing here is to be very careful regarding funding application deadlines. For example, the deadline for Gates US is approaching, is on the 16th of October. Most other applications, including non-US Gates, close in early January. I think this year is the 7th of January 2024, but double check this. And when you're applying, do make a thorough research of the collegiate system in Cambridge. Okay, as you know, Cambridge is a complex entity in itself, and you have the faculty and where you are going to be placed, but also colleges. And unfortunately, colleges are not all born equal. So some are more generous when it comes to offering grants and funds and scholarships, and others less so because they are not as well endowed. So do make that part of your investigation when it comes to canvassing the field in Cambridge, because that is important as well. You can also check all this online. So you apply for the course now, right? Earlier, if it's Gates, 16th of October, then you apply for funding, admissions. You will learn about them. Admissions are done in January, but you'll learn about them in the spring. And we allocate supervisors, and we welcome you in Cambridge. As you probably have seen by now, application material, you have your grades transcript, you have your language requirements, which are very important, the CV, 2 academic references. You can also have a professional reference, cover letter, and then, from my perspective, the most important part of your application, which is the research proposal, which is 500 words for the MPhil and 800 for the PhD. And another very important part that speaks to you fit to language requirements, to potential of the candidate, is the sample of work, which is again 3,000 to 5,000 words for MPhil, 5,000 to 7,000 words for PhDs. And this is how we get to know your work. It does not have to be something within the field of DH at all. It could be any field, any discipline, as long as you feel it's good and it's a good sample of you and your work. So this is what allows us to extrapolate, let's say, your potential. Finally, do drop us a line. We have, in this case, for the PhD, we have a PhD at cdh.ac.uk cambridge.cam.ac.uk. So feel free to drop us a line if you have questions beyond this session, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugo. And thank you to everyone who's been asking questions and trying to answer them in the background. We've now got a chance to go through some of these questions verbally, and I can see that there's a few that have come in that we could perhaps talk through. So I've got, actually, I'm going to probably go back to Hugo on this one. There's a question which is about somebody has in mind a supervisor who is in Cambridge but is outside of CDH. Is that is it possible to come with to get a supervisor who's not currently part of the supervisory team at CDH, for example, from the Centre for Future Intelligence? Would you like to address that one?
Yeah, sorry, still trying to drink water that I do not have in my mug. So technically, yes, it's important to say something about supervisor allocation, though. You do not choose your supervisor. So you apply to a program, and then the supervisor is allocated depending on the expertise and best match, right? We may have resources in CDH that allow us to supervise you, or in case we identify a student with great potential, and we happen not to have someone in CDH that can supervise that student, then we can reach out to other departments indeed and make some kind of arrangement, right? But ideally, the student will be supervised by someone within CDH. Having said that, also do have in mind that there's the supervisor and the advisor can be from any department across Cambridge. So those arrangements are possible.
Thanks very much. So there was a question which was, I might actually pass this to Leo, about the role of, for example, the grade point average and the prerequisites in terms of applications, because I think, Leo, you've got an idea from the last few years of how we weight different parts of the application process and what's the significance of your grades versus your experience versus your writing. So perhaps you could address that one.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, so obviously this is an extremely competitive program, and it's likely that applicants will be on the higher end of their respective grade distributions or whatever. But I would say it's often not as important as people tend to assume. The selection, we look at the applications much more carefully than just ranking by GPA, even once you've done all the transformations and arithmetic to turn them all into the same numbers, which we know is, of course, always a very imperfect and approximate calculation, for different sorts of university systems in different countries and so on. So I would say, if you've got a particularly low GPA, then you might want to explain why that is in your application. Although we have, at least at MPhil level, sometimes waived our own requirements for a GPA for a student we really wanted, who was then really successful. So again, they're always suggestions rather than hard and fast rules. What's much more important is the quality of the research proposal and the quality of the sample of work. Again, that doesn't mean that GPA counts for nothing. If it's anomalously low, I would explain it. If it's extremely high, I would point that out in your application, if you won prizes in the department, whatever it is. But it's likely that once you make the first cutoff, if you like, you're in the group of people we're really strongly considering, much more likely that we're going to be looking harder at your research proposal and at your sample of existing work. The sample of existing work, just to sort of preempt a question that comes up often, should it be about DH or should it be the best thing I've ever done? Of course, it's better if it's relevant. You know, if you've got a piece that's relevant, that's great, but it should really be a demonstration of your academic abilities in general. We're looking for that more than for a test of how much you know about digital humanities or something like that. So it's really a question of, you know, critical thinking, of writing, of argumentation, of evidence, of interesting research, of new ideas, rather than saying, look, I promise I know what TEI is or something. But I would say that that's where the focus is largely, rather than the GPA, which of course counts for something. It's not meaningless, but it tends to be secondary.
Thanks very much. So actually, I'd like to turn to Ryan, because there was a question which I think is kind of really in your subject area about corpus linguistics as an approach, and perhaps you could say something about, you know, how that might fit and how it might be work alongside whatever could be done, for example, in theoretical and applied linguistics approaches.
Yeah, I think it can certainly share a lot of overlaps. I mean, methodologically, a lot of the methods in computational text analysis, computational humanities are borrowed or derived from corpus linguistics. I would say the main difference would be the point, the purpose, or the spirit of the application of them. Is that even though, you know, we try to broaden the program beyond only the humanities, I think the humanities kind of inform the lens with which we apply these digital tools here at CDH. So, you know, one can imagine projects using corpus linguistic methods to talk about character speech or vernaculars in fiction or film, or I think, you know, from my experience with corpus linguistics, what the point one would want to make would be a little bit different from what you might try to argue in that discipline itself, but there's so much overlap that I would definitely think about it very much and think about what kinds of cultural arguments you might be interested in making with those methods. That sounded more negative than I meant it to be. I think that there's a lot of overlap. There's corpus linguists who are studying humanistic objects like the novel. And I think digital humanities has more to contribute to linguistics per se than it often lets on. So I think there's a really big overlap, and I would really encourage you to go for it.
Thanks very much. So there's a few questions actually I think we can answer quite quickly about the how many applicants we're getting. So, and maybe Victoria can correct me if I'm wrong. Actually, sorry, perhaps Hugo can correct me if I'm wrong. For the first year of the PhD application process, which happened last year, I think we had 120 applicants, and we ended up with about four places. So it is extremely competitive at the moment, very high volume of applicants and not a large number of places. So it's worth bearing that in mind. It's a very new program, so you know we're still at an early stage in establishing it, and don't have only 1 year's worth of data to go on. There's a couple of questions which relate to co-supervision with other institutions. I think probably the thing that I would say in those, particularly ones, some that are a bit more specific, the questions about existing projects that you might be involved with, where Cambridge research projects involving colleagues from within Cambridge. I would really I think I'd encourage you to get in touch directly and quite specifically about that, so we could give advice about what might be feasible. As far as I know, you can't be supervised, as Hugo said, across institution, like a co-supervision between two separate institutions, say Cambridge and Oxford, is not likely, but there's possibility. There might be a possibility for working out some way to involve two institutions within different departments inside Cambridge. Again, it would be a supervisor in CDH and then potentially an advisor elsewhere. And there are obviously opportunities for kind of collaboration, which are, you know, important to note. I wanted to bring in, I know there isn't specifically a question about this, but I'd like to give the opportunity to Jonathan to talk a little bit about his role as the RSE and what the research software engineer support that we give to PhD students offers to people who come and study with us. So I don't know, Jonathan, you'd like to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it's a different prospect from the MPhil because you have much more time, of course, to learn or develop technical skills you already have. But I'm available to work with PhD students to talk through. I wouldn't say it was, you know, it's much more of a kind of peer relationship, but to talk through what they're doing, what their research questions are, what possible tools there might be, and what difficulties they might be having. So I'm definitely available. Often find that the PhD students are more independent than that. They don't actually need or want my help. I'm always available to talk, and there are a couple of current PhD students who are working on LLMs, and I meet with them about once a term. We have coffee and we talk through what they're working on. So it's a kind of an informal relationship at the moment, but it's definitely something I am happy to do, happy to work with people if they have particular skills they need to develop. And of course, I'm just a kind of point of contact within CDH and the wider university. So if you have very specific technical needs that I can't help with, I can certainly talk to other people. We have RSC networks across the university and other technical people we can talk to try and set you up with the training that you need.
Thanks, Jonathan. I also want to add a little bit about the research methods training, because one of the things that is available to you as a PhD student, as it is in fact for PhD students across the whole university, is access to the Cambridge Digital Humanities Learning Programme, which I run. And that's again, it's a multidisciplinary research methods training programme that includes training in a whole range of different topics that might be relevant to your project, including, for example, computational text analysis, remote sensing investigations, critical approaches to AI. For example, we'll be running a workshop on working with large language models this year. We also run workshops in machine vision. We do include some introductory courses in first steps in Python and R, which can be helpful to get you going if you've never done any coding before. And as Jonathan said, as a PhD student, you would additionally have access to support from Jonathan for those. And we also run a methods fellowship program, which brings in research-led teaching from early career researchers turned into training sessions that will help bring together very interdisciplinary approaches to working with text, with video, with audio, from a range of different approaches. I wanted to mention that because that's part of, I think, the environment in which you can learn the skills that you need. And I wanted to relate this to questions that are talking a little bit about the research proposal. So one of the questions that was put in the Q&A is, if you have a few ideas, should you put them all down? I think personally, what I would say is that it's very important to try and produce as well-rounded, a coherent research proposal as possible. It's a short one. It's not very long, but you can look up online. You can see the guidance of the structure it's supposed to follow, because we need to, in order to assess whether it's right, you're right for us and we're right for you, we need to know about the questions that you want to ask. We need to know about the disciplinary framework within which you're approaching this. So you should be referring to things like existing literature, theoretical literature, what kind of theoretical approaches are you doing your project within their framework, and we want to know something about the methods that you propose to use. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't learn a tremendous amount and change what you do in the course of the PhD. That's part of that's what you're coming to us for, is to learn how to structure and deliver an independent research project, write it up, and do that in the round, if you like. And unless you tell us about the methods that you want to use and give some indication that you've done some background reading, you've looked at how other people have approached this question, it's very hard for us to assess the suitability of your fit with us. But it doesn't mean that we would expect you to stick to that. We would actually, often we get very good students who apply to us with a really excellent idea, and we look at their methodology and we think, actually, we can help you refine that. We can help you do that in a better way, in a more critical way. We can bring in resources, extra resources and methods you haven't thought of. And that's why you're a good fit for us. But without that detail about how you think you will tackle the questions that you're asking, that's very difficult for us to make a judgment about, whether you're the right person for our program and vice versa. So I would say there is a lot of material you can look up online about how to structure a research proposal. In relation to whether you should reach out to prospective supervisors beforehand, because this has come up a few times, I would just want to say that there's nothing to stop you, and in fact, you're very welcome to reach out to any of us in the prospective supervisory team. We're very happy to receive those inquiries. However, please be aware that with 120 people applying, we cannot possibly go through every prospective candidate's proposal in detail and work with you to develop it. That it's just not feasible in the workload we have, and it would be not very fair really either, because actually the supervisor doesn't choose the student, it's done at a collective level. In terms of questions of fit, I mean, speaking for myself, again, I'm very happy for prospective students to send me a proposal, and I'll try and give you a short answer as to whether you've understood the things that I'm interested in, or where my background in terms of research methods aligns with yours. But I do say, please do make sure not to just send it individually to supervisors. Please copy in the phd@cdh.cam email address, because if you've got, otherwise it may end up buried in my inbox and not get seen for weeks. You might have a very important urgent question, which actually colleagues on the team, Victoria and Karen and others, can answer as well. So don't just write only to individual supervisors, and it is not a requirement to get your individual supervisor's agreement to mention them as a prospective supervisor. You're very welcome to say, I would like to work with Anne Alexander or Hugo Leal or Ryan or Caroline, and that can be considered as part of the application process. And in fact, again, that's, if you think that's a good fit, that's a good idea to do so, but we can't guarantee you will definitely get that person. I'd like to, let's just see if there are more questions that need to be answered before we finish.
There are several questions on assessment and admissions, and I won't be sharing our admissions platform, but it's quite straightforward. We have two big chunks, basically. One part is academic record references, and the other part is project writing fit. The weight is the same. It's 15-point can share. It's 15 points each, up to 30. And then we'll be ranked accordingly. Having said that, we try to be as, actually, I'll rephrase that. I was going to say, we'll try to be as objective as possible. No, we'll try to be as subjective as possible, because for example, we might encounter in the project writing part something that sets your project apart and singles it in and single it out, and then we'll make an academic case for example. So do not refrain from applying one. Second, academic record and project are equally important, and professional career as well. Some people are asking about that. So if you are a mid-career professional, that's not a disadvantage. On the contrary, that's an advantage when it comes to the PhD. Okay.
Thanks very much. Somebody has been, so there's a few questions asking about the proposal samples for and the structure of the research proposal. Do we have any? Well, maybe again, I don't know. I could come back to Hugo on this. Do you have any recommendations where people could go to look at examples of research proposals, or are we planning to put any on our website that would be, you know, a guide for people on how to structure this?
Yeah, you will find both in University of Cambridge's website and several others, many resources in this regard. Obviously, we cannot, unfortunately, share with you examples of good research projects for obvious reasons, right? But we can share with you, and we'll try to put up on the website a couple of good references, books that teach you how to write and develop a research proposal, and also a series of resources that will point you in the right direction when it comes to developing a research proposal.
Thanks very much. So maybe I could just like to throw a question to Ryan. There's a question about what would you consider a strong competitive application? Maybe you could give us an idea of what kind of things you're looking for in somebody coming to do a PhD with you, just to have a broad overview.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Hugo and Leo were saying earlier, on the application itself, what is best is just demonstrating your preparedness for doctoral study in general. So in terms of the writing, in terms of the argumentation that you can make in your submission and your project proposal, even more so than the specific, you know, not all the details of your research project need to be absolutely ironed down, but that is also important. It's also good to see what you are imagining in terms of your methodology, in terms of what you would like to prove or disprove, or what certain hypotheses or interests that you have. Some familiarity with the basic landscape of the field, you know, would be helpful. You know, what are some other projects in DH that are kind of like your own, or that you'd like to be in dialogue with, would be helpful. But yeah, we don't want to make it seem as if you need to have already published a book, or you know, have an extensive research record in order to begin the PhD. That's what, you know, to a large extent, what doing a PhD helps you to accomplish. But yeah, some familiarity with the field would be helpful, just some kind of related work, and just demonstrating kind of your just preparedness for this kind of study.
Thanks very much. There's a question which I think is interesting about collaborations, partnerships between DH students and industry groups, labs, galleries, and so on. And is it possible to carve out those partnerships in the course of study? I think what I would say about that is that we would very much encourage PhD students who came to work with us to think about how they might interact with people in the world outside academia. But the PhD has to be is a work of an individual student. We don't currently have mechanisms for doing that jointly, you know, with external organizations. And so you would have it could cause it could be quite complicated if you were proposing some kind of industrial collaboration, for example, as part of your PhD research, because the PhD is an advanced degree that you are needed to carry out this research. But one of the areas where this may be what might become complex, it would be around intellectual property rights in the work. If you were, say, an employee of a company and doing a PhD, and the company wanted to assert ownership over some of the intellectual property that was created as the result of your research, that would be a problem, because you need to have the academic freedom to be able to research critically, to be able to carry out that process of asking those questions in a way that's not constrained by, you know, a corporate environment. But that doesn't mean that you can't interact with or work with people from industry or from the cultural heritage sector, say, for example. In some circumstances, and please get in touch if you are in one of those circumstances, there are, for example, some funding opportunities that arise where there's possibilities of collaborations, you know, with cultural heritage institutions. There have been a number of studentships, PhD studentships, that have come up in recent years that are DH related and involve collaboration, collaborative doctoral awards, and so on. So please, if there's something like that, and you're interested in studying with us, then do get in touch and we can look at the specifics. But I just wanted to try and highlight the difference, if you like, between carrying out PhD research, which has to be an independent, you have to be an independent researcher, and that means, you know, academically and intellectually independent of somebody else owning your research. It's got to be you that's in charge of it, versus the thing that we do would very much encourage, which is to think about how you can interact with people outside of the academic environment. And there are also, I should say, there are lots of areas of Cambridge where there is different kinds of research about digital technologies going on, where you would be able to interact with people from different parts of industry or cultural heritage or other non-academic bodies. So there's a very lively environment in which you could pursue those externally facing kind of research interests. I'm afraid we're going to have to finish up fairly soon. Can I just go back to the panel and see if there are any unanswered questions that people feel that they could quickly answer before we finish up on the live questions? I can see from a content point of view, I can see there's a question about VR technology and application in heritage. So it depends on that subject area. It depends really on the kind of topic you want to approach. We may well have, if it's for example in relation to kind of critical machine vision, critical approaches to, say, machine vision, then yes, we would have in our supervising team people who might be able to do that. I mean, Leo Input, who's not on the call, has a background in that would be suitable for some research questions related to heritage applications. But there's also possibilities that we might be able to work with, for example, history of art and architecture colleagues from there. So I think I would encourage you to consider applying and perhaps look a bit more into some of the research background of some of the supervisors and see if you feel there is a good fit. But it does depend quite a bit on the methods. There was a question. I see there's a question about ownership of IP. No, it doesn't. That's your research. Your research belongs to you as far as I'm aware, as the author of it, and it doesn't belong to the university. I mean, the university doesn't assert rights over the IP that staff create, so I don't see why it would for students. In terms of, there was also a quick question about, which I wanted to answer. I lost the question. Yeah, there was one more final kind of process-based question. It's like, do you advise that we send out a brief of our proposal to see if we can apply? I would say no, because we have hundreds of people apply and we can't look at them all. It will actually delay you waiting for us to answer this when you could. We would very much encourage you to go and do some work on looking at what, you know, examples of the resources on the website, do some reading around the subject, and so on, and see if you can develop a proposal that is able to have those structured sections that we mentioned. You know, that, and by that process, I think you will find out whether it will fit within our program. You, like I said, you're welcome to reach out to a prospective supervisor once you've got a fairly well-formed proposal to say, is this something that you feel would fit? And they may be able to answer, give you some feedback. They might, you know, steer you in a slightly different direction. But it's speaking from experience of the last few years, it's extremely difficult to give any meaningful answer if prospective students write to us and say, I'm thinking of doing something and it's quite vague and unformed and there's no methods attached to it. I can't really give a proper answer to that. In order to be able to make a good assessment, I need to see something that is already quite developed as a proposal. And if you're not sure how to get that going, then like I said, Hugo suggested you could look for resources online or try and find resources that will help you start that process, because it's you're much more likely to get a relevant answer if you can show us something that's already, you know, starting to develop as a proposal. I'm sorry, we're probably really going to have to finish. There was just one quick question that I think I will answer, which is, which, if I understood this right, is this collaborative, the question about CDAs, I think that means collaborative doctoral awards. You'd have to look at the scheme, you know, what the scheme would require. In some cases, there are collaborative doctoral awards that are, you know, they're led by the hosting institution, and therefore there could be a degree of discussion between CDH, the hosting institution, and the prospective and the applicant to define a project so that it would involve input from both the student and the institution. In some cases, the institution does just set they have a project they want to do and they put out it's like applying for a job, in a sense, and the discussion might be between CDH and the institution. So I think if you think that might apply to you, then I think I would get in touch at the earliest possible opportunity to see whether that's feasible to do. I'm afraid we've kind of come to the end of the time that we've got, unless anyone else from the panel wants to jump in with the final point. Otherwise, thanks very much to everyone for joining, and we look forward to reading your applications. And please get in touch via phd@cdh.cam.ac.uk, and remember, please don't write to individual supervisors without copying in that email address. And I won't tell you how many unread emails I have in my inbox, but you can imagine they're quite a lot. So please do make sure to keep the PhD email copied in to make sure that we get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.